Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've been in the wrestling business long enough to hear all the stories. Haunted arenas, cursed wrestlers, spirits of old-timers still lurking in the places where they once fought for their dreams. Most of the time, I laugh them off. Wrestlers are just like any other group of people. We like a good story, something to scare the rookies and keep the old guys entertained on long road trips. But I never thought I'd experience one of those stories myself. Until that night in Madison Square Garden. It was a routine house show. Nothing special, just a packed arena, a few warm-up matches before the main event. I had worked a dark match that night, something quick and forgettable to hype up the crowd before the cameras started rolling. By the time I made it to the locker room, the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me with nothing but sore muscles and a sweat-soaked shirt. The place was dead quiet. Most of the guys were still ringside, watching the main event or grabbing a bite. A few crew members moved around outside, but inside the locker room, it was just me. I dropped my duffel bag onto the bench, sat down, and started unlacing my boots. That's when I heard it. A rustling sound, like someone was digging through one of the gear bags behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see one of the other guys back early. Nothing, just a row of lockers, their metal doors slightly ajar, a few loose jerseys hanging inside. The mirror across from me reflected my own tired face, my hand still working at my laces. I shook my head. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Too many hits to the head. I went back to my boots. Then I heard it again. This time a whisper. Low, almost like a breath. A guttural murmur. The kind of sound someone makes when their throat is clenched too tight to form words. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized. It was just noise, raw and wet, angry. The hairs on my arms prickled up. I told myself it was nothing. Just the pipes settling or my brain filling in the silence with something it wanted to hear. But my gut said otherwise. My gut was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I reached for my bag, standing up fast. That's when I saw it. Not in front of me. Not behind me. In the mirror. A shadow. Tall. Hunched. Twisted. Its head was tilted at a sickening angle. Like a wrestler who'd just taken a pile driver wrong and hadn't gotten back up. The figure loomed in the farthest corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light, but there was no mistaking it. It was watching me. My breath hitched to my throat. My entire body locked up. My muscles stiff as iron rods. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see it with my own eyes. But I did. I spun. Fast. Nothing. The room was empty. Just me and my reflection in the mirror. I turned back. My reflection was still there. But the shadow wasn't. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I don't remember leaving the room. I don't remember running down the hall. But I do remember the way my heart pounded in my ears when I finally stopped outside, gulping down air like I'd just gone 20 minutes in the ring. For a long time, I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light, a combination of exhaustion and too many urban legends bouncing around my head. Then, a few days later, I told one of the old-timers about it. He had been around for years, long enough to know all the ghosts in every arena. When I described the locker room and what I had seen, his face lost its color. "You were in that room?" he asked. I nodded. He swallowed hard, took a breath. That used to be Benoit's locker room. I didn't say anything after that. I haven't been back in that room since. And I never will. Story 2. I've wrestled in a lot of places. High school gyms where the floors creaked underfoot like brittle bones. Flea markets where the crowd was too drunk to know who was winning. Even a parking lot once, where the ring was set up between two dumpsters, and the ref had to pause mid-count to swat away a rat. But nothing ever got under my skin quite like that ring in Georgia. It was an old venue, older than dirt, some of the guys said. Before WWE bought it out, it was a training gym, had a reputation. Some of the biggest names in the business had come through those doors, cutting their teeth, taking their bumps, learning the trade. And then there was the other reputation. I heard whispers in the locker room, half-laughed rumors between guys lacing up their boots. That ring's cursed, one of them said, smirking as he taped his wrists. They used to train kids here. One of them never left. I didn't ask questions. Didn't care. At least, not until I stepped into that ring. The first thing I noticed was the mat. It was too soft. Not like a regular wrestling ring, where the boards give just enough. This felt different. Spongy, almost wet under my boots. Like stepping on a swollen bruise. I bounced on my heels, testing it. The give was unnatural, like the ring was breathing. The second thing I noticed was the air. It was thick, stagnant, like the place had been shut up for years. The smell of old sweat and mildew curling in my nostrils. The turnbuckles were stiff, like no one had touched them in years. Something about the whole setup made my skin crawl, but the show had to go on. My opponent, Big Danny, was already in the ring, cracking his knuckles. Solid guy, worked stiff but safe. We'd gone over the match in the back. 10-minute bout, back and forth, he goes over. Easy work. Bell rings. Match starts. First few minutes were fine. We locked up. Worked a slow build. Crowd was into it. Then I took a bump. Flat back. Textbook. And the second I hit the mat, I felt it. Hands. Not the way the mat normally moves when you land. This was different. These were fingers. Gripping. Clutching. Pulling. I sucked in a sharp breath. Heart hammering against my ribs. It was quick. Just a second. Maybe less, but it was enough to make me scramble to my feet. Big Danny gave me a look, mouthing, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. My skin was crawling. My pulse thrummed in my ears. We kept going. I tried to shake it off. But then Danny went for a body slam. And he felt it too. The second my back hit the mat, Danny jerked back like he'd been electrocuted. His eyes went wide. And for a second, he just stood there, staring at the ring. His lips moved like he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. I didn't wait. I called an audible, rushed the finish. Small package, quick pin, 1, 2, 3. The ref looked relieved. The second I rolled out of the ring, I hit the floor hard. My legs weren't steady. My whole body was buzzing like I'd stuck a fork in a socket. I turned back, heart pounding, and did the one thing I shouldn't have done. I lifted the apron, and there was nothing. No wires, no gimmicks, no crew hiding under there. Just blackness. I dropped the apron and looked at Danny. His face was bone white. He shook his head once, just barely, and walked away. Backstage, I didn't say anything. I just sat down, laced my boots, stared at the floor. Then one of the older road agents came over. A guy who'd been around forever, seen it all. He crouched next to me and spoke low. "You felt it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. He already knew. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. They used to train kids here, he said, voice heavy. One of them died in that ring. Broke his neck. Something cold slithered down my spine. They say he never left, the agent muttered. I don't wrestle in that venue anymore. Story 3. Wrestling's got ghosts. Every old-timer knows it. Every rookie hears the stories. Some of them are just good locker room tales. Stuff to scare the green kids before their first house show. But every now and then, you hear a story that feels real. The kind that makes your skin crawl when you step into the ring at some rundown venue. The kind that makes you check over your shoulder when you're lacing up your boots. I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between fiction and fact. But there's one night, one match, that I still can't explain. It happened before I signed with WWE. I was working the indie circuit, taking whatever bookings I could get, driving hours for a payday that barely covered gas. The venue was in the middle of nowhere, some tiny armory that smelled like sweat, stale popcorn, and something older. You know how some places just feel wrong? That was this place. The second I walked in, I felt it in my gut. The promoter was an old school guy. Looked like he'd been around since the territory days. He pulled me aside and told me I'd be tagging with a guy named Mad Dog Malone. I never heard of him, but apparently he was a legend. The kind of guy who used to draw blood every match back when wrestling was real to people. They said his finishing move, a running knee to the head, was so stiff it got banned from TV. That's what the promoter told me. Anyway, Mad Dog's old school, he said. He'll be here. That was the first red flag. No one had seen him yet. But the way they talked about him, I figured maybe he was just one of those guys who kept to himself. Bell time came. I stood in my corner, waiting. The crowd was small, maybe 50 people, all packed into rows of old folding chairs. The house lights were dim, making the ring look like it was floating in the dark. And then he showed up, tall, built like a dam bear. His face was a road map of old scars, the kind you only get from barbed wire and broken glass. He didn't say a word, just stood on the apron, breathing heavy like a dog that had been running too long. I barely had time to process him before the match started. The other team worked me over hard. I took a beating, stiff shots, brutal slams. It felt like they were trying to see if I could take it, if I'd crumble. But I wasn't some rookie. I took the pain, sold the hits, waited for my chance. Finally, the moment came. I reached out for the tag. His hand was ice cold. I don't mean cold like this guy didn't warm up. I mean freezing, like touching metal in the dead of winter. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache. But then he stepped into the ring, and I swear to God, I've never seen anything like it. He didn't wrestle, he destroyed. Every move was stiff. Every hit sounded like gunfire in that tiny building. He clotheslined one guy so hard I thought his head was going to roll into the front row. The ref looked scared. The crowd? Dead silent. Then came his finisher, the running knee. It hit so hard the guy just collapsed. No sell, no twitching, just down. The ref hesitated, then dropped for the count. 1, 2, 3. We won. I rolled out of the ring, dazed, trying to catch my breath. I turned to celebrate with Mad Dog, maybe shake his hand, but he was gone. I mean gone. Not at ringside, not walking up the aisle, just vanished. I stumbled to the back, my heart hammering. I found a promoter near the gorilla position and grabbed his arm. Where the hell did Mad Dog go? He looked confused. "Who?" "Mad Dog Malone," I said. "My partner." His face went pale. "Kid," he said slowly, "Mad Dog Malone died in '83. I laughed, but my stomach had already dropped. Told him that was impossible. I had just wrestled with him. He didn't argue. He just told me to check the footage. So I did. I found one of the guys recording on his phone, snatched it out of his hands, and rewound to our match. I watched myself take the beating. I watched myself crawl to the corner for the tag. I saw my hand shoot out, and I saw nothing. My hand just hung there. No one tagged in. No one entered the ring. And then, the worst part, the opponent, he still got destroyed. Clotheslined, suplexed, pinned. His head still snapped back when the running knee hit. But I was the only one in the ring. I felt something in my chest tighten. My mouth went dry. I handed the phone back without saying a word. I packed my bag and got the hell out of there. I've wrestled all over the world. I've had my share of weird experiences, heard plenty of ghost stories. But this wasn't a story. I don't know what I wrestled that night. But I know one thing for sure. Some wrestlers never leave the ring.